Welcome to Southern Steep, the public health and social justice podcast brought to you by NASDAD, a nonprofit, nonpartisan association mission to end the intersecting epidemics of HIV, viral hepatitis, and related conditions. Much like Brewing Stronger Tea, this platform aims to brew a stronger community by centering community leaders' voices and their innovative work in the Southern United States.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to our series finale of Southern Steep, Brewing Stronger Community. My name is Nicole Elenoff, and I'm joined by some incredible hosts of Southern Steep, the current season, and of seasons past. How's it going, everyone?
It's going well. I'm excited.
Hey, Nicole. Hello, everyone. I am well on this lovely morning.
You know, Roderick, Shanice, it's so good to have you. And we have someone else from a previous season. You might have heard his voice before once or twice. How's it going, Isaiah?
It's great to be back, Nicole. How are you?
You know, I'm doing really well, and I'm just so glad that the four of us could be here together for our, closeout of season 4, but also to tie a nice little bow or finish up our nice steaming cup of the strong brew we've had. We've really brewed a strong one here on these last 4 seasons. I do find that this is a little bittersweet, though. I like having this be the series finale just because it's been really incredible having so many great conversations with folks. I know that this isn't the stop. Well, who knows what's going to continue, but I don't know. I'm looking forward to this reflective episode we're going to have where we talk about all the different seasons in a way.
I will say that there have been some amazing guests on this show over the past few seasons. As I went back thinking about which clip that I personally wanted to highlight, I was like, this is kind of hard because there have been so many good guests. And I was reminded of that just kind of like in the preparation for the show. And I think that all of the co-hosts here have picked some really good clips that I hope that folks will appreciate.
We really have spoken to so many amazing people from all across the South, and I'd be remiss if I didn't mention some of the other co-hosts that have been along the journey with us. So just wanted to give a quick shout out to Jacoby, Justin, Justine, Vrushab, Torian, Bianca. Special shout out to them, and special shout out to y'all. So I guess, how do folks feel about it being, our last episode?
Sad face. I feel like I just got here.
Same. You were talking about nostalgia earlier, and I was kind of like, I am bereft of nostalgia because I just got here.
But the magic you've made on season 4, Shanice, has definitely been something. So you've made an impact, even though you've been only on 1 season.
Yeah, I'm excited to join y'all on your walk down memory lane and kind of, do the Southern Steep retrospective.
Well, shall we begin?
Yeah.
All right. So we are going to be taking folks down memory lane by highlighting 4 different clips from 4 different seasons. And I'm excited to pass it over to Shanice first to introduce her clip.
Thank you so much, Nicole. So we're starting with a clip from the most recent season, season 4, when Roderick and I were joined by AJ King, who works in the theater space. And I chose this clip because it really resonated with me as a theater lover and someone who came into doing this work from an arts background. I used to work in the museum and gallery world, and it just demonstrated the ways that art can empower and transform us. And, that voice, Roderick is so talented with the most incredible voice. And it was just really lovely to hear him share his talents and demonstrate how powerful AJ's work is. So, it was very moving and beautiful. And we can get into the clip.
I am a Breaking Ground alumni. I actually can highlight some of the work that we have done because it actually segues into my next question. So I want to highlight a little excerpt from some stuff I did with AJ and Breaking Ground back in the day. So here it is. My brush is painting a portrait that tells you that afterwards I conquered and beat HIV. You see, I'm undetectable and my T cells are flying high. I have a fabulous job as a HIV advocate, which includes traveling the world and speaking engagements. Can't forget about attending the most fabulous events, galas, happy hours, and of course, Sunday brunch. Though the real masterpiece uses dark and mysterious colors that represent the guilt and the shame that and the pain that my heart felt. I knew better. But if I knew better, why didn't I do better? I mean, I do have the right to explore my sexual liberation. Why didn't I do that responsibly? Enough of that. Let's talk about the beauties of art. I can paint whatever picture I want you to see. Outside looking in, you think this masterpiece is complete. A true masterpiece is always evolving and changing.
I love that so much.
I love that so much too. I remember listening to that clip live, or when you all did that show, and it just moved me to no end, and it moves me now. So, and I can't get enough. Thanks for sharing.
Of course, it just really reminded me of, at least personally, why I got into this work, and just, really thinking about how interconnected the arts are with like AIDS activism and advocacy and community organizing. That was my entry into doing this work, and it's just really meaningful. So thank you, Roderick, for sharing that with us.
Yes, of course. I, as a host and a producer of a few different episodes on the show, I was intentional about ensuring that we had art as a part of the conversation, because advocacy does not exist without art. We have to capture people's minds and hearts and attention some way to really fuel the change that we want to see in our community, especially as it relates to the beautiful and vibrant people of the South. And thank y'all for y'all flowers. I appreciate it. I remember Nicole had sent me an email afterwards and was just like, I just have to let you know, like, the episode was fantastic. So I really appreciate it. Thank y'all so much.
I want to add my appreciation to you, Roderick, for bringing such vulnerability to the podcast and really being an expert storyteller. And also, I'm reminded that, in my opinion, people are really brought to this movement and this work through two ways: either a personal connection or some sort of connection through the arts, whether it be the AIDS quilt, whether it be a film or a play or spoken word. Most people are really brought to the realization about HIV and AIDS through art. And so I think that has to be, we have to remind ourselves that that's how most people engage with us and engage with this movement, if they're not personally touched by it. And so I think that that's just something that we should definitely remember and lift up.
Yeah, when you were speaking, Isaiah, it just made me think about how, these stories weren't being told, outside of art spaces, and how important it is to have these storytellings continue on, the oral history. And yeah, now there's more places that HIV and AIDS are talked about, but it really got started through the art space. Yeah, I don't know. It was just really powerful. And Roderick, thank you so much for bringing in so much art into the seasons that you've been part of.
Yes, of course. I just hold the arts near and dear to my heart, and it has been a privilege to be able to use the art as a outlet to, reach out to my community, as an outlet to express myself. And it's also a very beautiful community, which is why I wanted to invite some of my folks on, because we have great chemistry, great connection, and we build connections through, our art endeavors. So it's been, I'm happy and grateful to have been able to be in a space where we could, highlight the arts in such a way and talk about the importance of both with advocacy and art. So, yeah.
And you've been with Southern Steep for the last 2 seasons, coming onto the scene or the podcast in season 3. And it's just been amazing to see your podcasting. And I think you have a clip for us that from season 3 to share.
Oh, yes, I do. I was so conflicted between what episode I was going to feature, but when I realized that Shanice was highlighting our episode from season 4, I said, okay, I'll do Deets, because I felt like the episode I did with Monster J. Wolf from Brave Soul Collective was a really good episode and talking about art and advocacy. But Deets was definitely probably one of my favorite recorded episodes. And so I'll let them go in and play a little clip so we can unpack it.
And when I got into HIV healthcare, it felt like legacy and practice, because I didn't grow up with queer elders. I didn't grow up with representation of queer people around me, largely because of the HIV pandemic stealing so many of us. For the people of my generation, I'm in my 30s. So a lot of the people who would have been mentors, a lot of the people who would have been the folks showing the way, weren't there because of this pandemic. And so working in the field to try and support people who are living with HIV, to learn from them, to learn from people who are doing organizing, and to also think about prevention, about how we keep our communities safe, felt like the strongest way that I could connect to my queer lineage and my queer history, and to fight for my people, to fight for my community, just like they fought to keep me alive. So that's how I wound up doing it. And again, the community organizing, especially in New Orleans around HIV at the time in the early 2010s, was vibrant, super vibrant. It's not that it's not now, but people were so excited to be making a difference. And Ryan-White planning bodies do a pretty unique thing in terms of broader healthcare systems, in terms of supporting people with wraparound psychosocial services and seeing how community input really can make a real difference in how things are done. It just felt like community input and patient input having power in a way that I'd never seen happen anywhere else. So all of those things just piqued my curiosity and piqued my passion. And I've been working in it ever since. I'm lengthy.
No, that is major. And I love that you mentioned the point of how the people who are doing the work in sexual health, HIV treatment, prevention, all of that, we lost a lot of elders due to the pandemic. We lost a lot of elders. We lost a lot of potential mentors. The mentors from that era that I have been able to encounter, I am most definitely grateful to have had the opportunity to work with them. But we lost a lot of people in this fight, which is why I think it's important that we continue the fight, in honor of them. Yeah, this clip really touched me because throughout the show, there has been several shows I've done on the podcast where we talk about the importance of mentorship. I hold mentorship very closely to my heart because I've had mentors in various stages of my life, and I know the importance of mentorship. And, I do think about how the fact that, when the HIV/AIDS epidemic first came along, it took out a lot of our leaders. And so because of this is a missed opportunity for some intergenerational conversations and connections that could have happened. I think about, when we talk about the arts, I think about people like Essex Hemphill and Marlon Riggs and Dr. Ron Simmons. And thankfully, I did have the opportunity to work with Dr. Ron Simmons, and that's helping us. But, I think about those type of people who were fighting the epidemic and using arts as an outlet to express themselves and to reach their community. And the fact that, I'm not able to do that, so it really hit home when I heard that part. And I was like, yeah, let's highlight that, because I feel like we've talked a lot throughout the show about the importance of mentorship, the importance of collaboration, the importance of community. So.
Thank you, Roderick. Sorry, I'm just soaking it in.
I think that's a really powerful clip that you chose. And I love that we were able to have Deets on the episode. Deets has been doing some really great work in Louisiana and across the South through the different work that they do. Dietz is a powerhouse, and they have been doing really great work. So I'm so happy that you were able to speak with them on that episode.
Yeah, these is they're like their energy was just phenomenal on the episode, and I also love that they talked about connecting with their queer lineage. For me, as an African American man, being connected to my lineage and my ancestors is important, but I also think about my queer ancestors, my queer lineage. You know, we might not be directly related, but we share and come from a similar experience. And there's a lot of wisdom that I feel that, you know, people like Dietz and myself can take from really learning the lessons of, you know, what our queer ancestors' lineage went through and, you know, using that to, you know, propel us in the fight.
Well, you know, Nicole, I think this is an excellent segue into the third clip that we're going to share with the listeners, because Dietz has been, for the past couple of years, one of our key partners in the SIBA work that we've done in the South. And another one of those key partners has been the Southern AIDS Coalition and their work that they've been doing with us, particularly around our CBO outreach, this podcast, and other activities. And early on in season 2, we had Defina Ward on the show. She is the executive director of Southern AIDS Coalition, also known as SAC. And at the time, she was early on in her role because she's been at SAC for a minute. And then she was appointed to be their executive director, and she's now been in that role for a number of years. But at the time of this recording, she was new-ish to that role. And Bianca had just read her introduction and then had asked her a very simple follow-up question about like how she got into the work. And she gave a really revealing answer that struck me. So let's listen to Defina talk about her kind of leadership journey, and we can discuss it on the other side.
I think, wow, I've been doing this a long time for a line of work that I don't want to say I fell into, but I was destined to come into, but it was not on my radar to move into the work of HIV and health equity. I was an attorney. So I also describe myself as a recovering attorney because I was an attorney who was doing bankruptcies and landlord-tenant claims and all things not so fun and not focused on community upliftment and empowerment. And I wasn't fulfilled. And so I'm so thankful to be in this space and so thankful to still be working in this space. So excited.
That is a huge shift from bankruptcy and all of the lawyer legal work to HIV and your current position. So starting with that, how did you get into this work? What is your why story?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's there's so many levels to it. On a personal level, I was a new mom when I started in this work. And as I was practicing law and preparing for litigation, and I had a 2-year-old at home, and I said, this cannot be life. This cannot be what's keeping me away from her. And then when I became pregnant with my second daughter, I said, I want to do work where I can justify the time away from my girls. And that's really what happened. So I continued to practice law when an opportunity became available to do some consulting work around HIV prevention fundraising in Alabama. And I'm like, oh, I can do that on the side. That'll be a fun little feel-good thing to do. And I just fell in love with it. So that's kind of the personal side as it relates to kind of the moment and the timing. But on a larger level, I'm a survivor of intimate partner violence. I was in a severely abusive relationship for years as an adolescent and young adult. And I often reflected on the long-term impact that had on me and also those things that could have happened as a result of that relationship and didn't. And one of those is HIV transmission. And I would often have those conversations with young ladies in my community around just all of those things we don't talk about, those variables of trauma and harm that we don't talk about. And so just realizing that there was work to do specifically around the needs of Black women in the South. And so it just felt like a calling. And lastly, when I was clerking at Southern Poverty Law Center as a law student, preparing to go out and practice law, one of the primary cases I worked on was a class action in a rural county jail in the Black Belt where a person could not get access to his medications for HIV. And that was my first opportunity to see what lack of access could do as it related to being engaged and retained in HIV care and all the systemic barriers that were in place and doing harms to communities most impacted. So it was just a lot of things that pointed me to this work. And I'm so glad that I listened when all of that came together.
So notice that Dafina never used the word intersectionality as she was talking about her experience. And we often think about or talk about intersectionality in like this perfunctory clinical way, but the way that she weaved together just a simple introduction to us about her personal experiences, her professional experiences, and how it led her to be executive director for SAC. I just thought it was like that little clip. I think anybody can understand how she ended up from a legal career into a career in public health and why it's so impactful to her on a multitude of levels. And like, that's what intersectionality is really, without it feeling like just the perfunctory academic slide that we sometimes kind of put up when we talk about it. And she never used the word. And I just thought that it was just a really great, again, storytelling way of really making folks understand why the work we do is so important. And by the way, she's just a fabulous person. So there's that.
She truly is a fabulous person, and I really enjoyed listening to her episode, and specifically that clip, because as we were talking about earlier, there's so many different ways that people can get into this work, and really appreciate her example and experience and how she got here, because I'm sure that's similar to so many people as well.
I completely understand what you're saying in terms of intersectionality and how, like, you know, we were able to look at various pieces of her as she described her experience and why she got into, you know, HIV advocacy and the work. So I get it completely.
So we are now at the season 1 of the podcast. And I've had the privilege of being a co-host on Southern Steep for all 4 years of its run. I know. How did that happen?
I didn't even realize you were
OG.
I didn't even realize you were that old.
You know, I just celebrated my 4-year anniversary at NASTAD, and coming up on 4 years of this podcast. I've been a podcast co-host for 4 years now. That's a resume item, right? Anyway, yeah, so 4 years of this podcast. It got started in 2020. We launched it December 1st, World AIDS Day of 2020. And we really wanted to have this podcast to build more relationships with folks, especially in the middle of the panini. So the clip that I'm going to be sharing is from season 1, episode 2. And it was the first ever episode that I was on a podcast. And because this is my last episode, I thought it would be, you know, a full circle moment. But, you know, beyond that, the person that I'm featuring is Daniel J. Downer, and he's the executive director of the Bros and Convo Initiative. And this is, you know, from December 2020. And I asked him, what do you think you're the most proud of? So let's hear his response.
Oh, wow. I think what I am the most proud of is just being able to create a space that was not there before for community members to feel seen, to feel heard, to feel valued. I think about like prior to the Bros and Convo initiative, there was no Black queer-led organization specifically for young Black men of all spectrums. And so I think that's what I'm most proud of, is that that myself and my staff, we were able to create a space that wasn't there before, and definitely is being utilized. And even when I think of like all of the activities and the programs and everything that has come from that, I'm really most proud of being able to create that space, because it's created such an impact that I anticipated, but I didn't anticipate, but has continuously affirmed me that like, this is needed. Like, this is needed, and it continues to be needed. So I think that's my greatest accomplishment.
So when I was preparing for this episode, Daniel and I are good friends, and he recently announced that he is stepping down as executive director for Bros and Convo initiative. And, he's moving to his next chapter, and the organization is, incredibly sustainable and has been sustained. And I just find that, 4 years later, and listening back to that clip, the impact that he's describing has been quadrupled since the time we spoke in December 2020. And I'm just so proud of the work that he's done in Central Florida, and excited to see what is more to come from Daniel and his next journey.
Yes, shout out to Daniel. Daniel is one of my baby bros. Back in the day, him and I did a cohort called Build a Brother Institution. Last time I talked about them, I can't remember the acronym because it's been so long, but that's the name of the cohort we did together. We worked very closely, intimately together, and I actually was on the phone with him when he came up with the idea for Bros and Convos initiative. So I was so happy to see that from a space of like creating space for Black queer people, came the Bros and Convo initiative, and this actually came into fruition. I was so happy and so proud of him. A shout out to Daniel. A shout out to my other baby bros out there. We'll always have much love for my baby bros.
I love that you have that connection with him, Roderick. And I remember when he was part of that initiative, and he was sharing about all of the great community members and connections that he's made. And it's just really cool to be on the line with you, one of those people. Living in Orlando before Bros and Convo came onto the scene, and it's just really made such an impact on so many different lives in that community, and it's just so incredible.
Yeah, I just in my working community, and we've also talked about this a lot throughout the seasons of the podcast, and the importance of creating safe spaces. If for people that know me on the social scene, I am very I'm very into safe spaces. Safe spaces, good time, good vibes, good food, all of that. And so, at his clip, he talked about just the importance of, again, creating those safe spaces for people to come, creating spaces for people to be heard, for people to be seen, and, creating spaces that haven't been created for us before. I'm so proud of him and the work that he's done over the years.
Feel now that we've gone through 4 different clips from 4 different seasons?
I'm just sitting here reflecting, as someone who's newer to the pod, it's been really nice to just be able to get that sort of long-ranging perspective from y'all, and just, look back at the history of the podcast. And Nicole, as someone who's been here since the very beginning, I have a question for you. Has the trajectory of the podcast, Isaiah, I have one for you too. You guys can both answer. But has the trajectory for this podcast, like, have you seen it shift as you've been on the pod? Like, has the way that you've interacted with like community advocates changed? Has the focus shifted? I would just like to hear more about sort of what your big picture takeaways are from, where you've been.
Thanks, Shanice. Yeah. So I think at the beginning of the podcast, we were so much more, I don't know if I want to say limited, but we really were thinking more about like who we knew and who was in our networks amongst the different hosts and what we were hearing. And as the years have gone on and we've been able to travel a lot more, there's been so much more opportunity to meet people in real time and identify folks that are in community to come and invite them to the podcast. We've been able to do some live recordings at the both of our Southern CBO summits. And when this got started, I didn't know if that was ever going to be a possibility. We started this at the height of the pandemic, and it's just been really cool to see how things have grown and changed and the different co-hosts we've had. It's just, I don't know, it's just been a really nice journey.
Thanks, Nicole. And I didn't realize that the podcast started with the pandemic. And I think it's because of that, we have the opportunity to sort of like develop this time capsule of looking at how like community organizing and outreach has shifted since the pandemic, especially in our work. So I'm just like grateful for this archive. It's really rich. And I think it's something that our listeners and other people in the field will be able to continue to revisit.
Shanice, you're so right, because, some things that we asked people about was how they were navigating COVID and, their outreach work. And, as the seasons moved on, those questions weren't necessarily as relevant because they've been doing that for the last couple of years. And then MPOX happened and we asked about that. And so, as the field has evolved, some of our questions and discussion has grown too.
Yeah, and I think, one of the things that Nicole does, as a part of our STIBA work is, and the outreach visits to community-based organizations in the South. And when we started this, Nicole, I believe, correct me if I'm wrong, it was an opportunity to engage with them virtually because we couldn't do it in person. And then over time, we were able to once again be together in the same spaces. And so then we just kind of continued the show. But the show was really about centering the voices of community leaders in the South and being able to engage with them, even though when the show started, we couldn't physically be in the same space. And so that was really what it was. And it just kind of blossomed. And even though we've had an evolution in the co-hosts, some who've researched all the episodes and some who just come to the mic not having listened to any, but what we have now is, all sorts of people's takes on it. And it has really just gone off into a lot of different directions, some that we could not have foreseen. We could not have foreseen like the gems that Shanice and Roderick have brought to the show and the gems of hosts who've come and gone. So like, it's just been great to see, really. And yes, that was shade towards Shanice at the tail end of my previous comment.
Shade,
Is it shade if it's like blasting in my face like the heat of 1,000 suns?
Oh, God.
I'm filing a report.
If anything, what is it even a podcast if we don't have a little shade? Thank you for making this an actual podcast.
Just let me circle back. Roderick helpfully talked about the importance of sort of mentorship and just like having folks in this work who have different ranges of experience. And Isaiah, as someone who's been doing this work, for a while and has like occupied, I'm not calling you old, I'm calling you experienced, but has like occupied like several different roles in the HIV space. I would love to hear about how this podcast has like enriched your interactions with like folks doing community organizing or whatever you want to share, boss.
That's a very interesting question. So, a lot of what we talked about, in today's show is like how folks ended up kind of like where they are and like what their journey was. And so my own personal journey was never really public health. So unlike some of you and some of our colleagues, like I didn't study public health in school. I don't have an MPH, for example. My study was communications. My journalism, my education is in journalism. And so like just talking to people and interviewing people and being curious about who they are is really part of my like core self, and being able to do that in the context of work is just always fulfilling. And so like, you know, bringing on all these different folks, telling their own stories, getting to know why they do what they do, getting to understand how they're moving their organizations forward. Nicole picking Daniel is a perfect example, because when we spoke to him 4 years ago, he and his organization was in one place, and now they're in a different place, and the organization is in a different place. And I am endlessly fascinated with how people move through spaces, how they grow, how their ideas kind of take flight and become new things that they hadn't even imagined. Like that fascinates me. And so being able to do that as a part of this show is kind of really why it was so exciting. And I think I did, Nicole, correct me if I'm wrong, 2 seasons? I didn't do season 3, right?
No, sir, you were in 3 seasons.
Oh my God, that's how old I am. I don't even remember how long I've been doing this. But yes, it was great. So I've only missed 1 season. That's really good. Okay.
Thank you, Isaiah. I really appreciated that response.
All right. So as we come to a close, I got 2 closeout questions for us. And throughout the show, we always talked about like what we loved about the South, what do we want for the South. So we're going to end the show off in a similar vibe. And so what I address to my fellow and fabulous co-hosts is, what have you learned about the South, and what are your continued hopes for the South?
I can start. As someone who wasn't as familiar with the South before I started working on this podcast, I'm first gen, so my experience in this country is like pretty concentrated in the Northeast. I've just really enjoyed being able to learn about like the rich history of organizing in the South, and community organizing in particular. I think I've always been aware of it in a more abstract sense, but it's been nice to get that hands-on, like firsthand experience from our guests. And I guess what I hope for the South is just a continuation of, I think, the perspective shift I've witnessed in how folks talk about the South, just understanding that there's like a significant amount of power there that's always been there, and that, it's not good to sort of do this like carte blanche, like write off of folks in the South because of preconceived notions people have about their level of education, their ability to advocate for themselves, just understanding that like progressive values look different regionally, and that just because folks aren't organizing in the way that like you see as like the most radical, the most progressive, doesn't mean that the organizing isn't worthwhile. That was a bit long-winded, but I just really appreciate the sort of creativity that we've seen from folks organizing in the South, and I just like wish for like a continuation of that.
So I think one of the things this show has demonstrated is just the depth and breadth of the innovation and the expertise of people who are doing this work. And everyone that's been on this show has been a Southerner or connected to work in the South in some way, shape, form, or fashion. And the episodes of Southern Steep are just a testament to not only the passion for that work, but the ingenuity that's being brought to it. It's just like constantly, in my view, getting better. And we can point to any one of those episodes that we've done to kind of demonstrate that. So for me, that's kind of what I've learned or have been reminded of. And what are my continued hopes for the South? That the South keeps Southing, if I can make that. You know what? I'm going to trademark that this afternoon and put it on a t-shirt. The South keeps Southing, because don't steal it, Roderick. Don't you dare. I don't want to hear that in no spoken word.
You better get a trademark.
And what I really mean by that, guys, is, oftentimes regions of the country are pitted against one another, and you're just like, oh, well, you need to justify this, or you need to do that. Well, not really. You know what? Every region has value. Every community has something to offer. The South is unique. It has its challenges, just like every other pocket of the country. But let's be a little bit more assets based when we think about it, and let's let the South keep Southing. I'm going to stick with that.
Let's see what's chosen. What will be the chosen one? I think for me, if anything, like it's just really reaffirmed and re-inspired. But just the people that we've spoken to, the work that's going on, the nature in which people will just keep on going, and the persistence, perseverance, resilience that folks have shown. But kind of going to your point, Isaiah, we have talked to a bunch of folks that didn't necessarily grow up in the South, but then through their work or family or whatever, ended up moving to the South, and they stayed. And I think that's really powerful to me, because they saw what the South has to offer, and that's just so much. To your point, Shanice, the organizing and the spirit that is in the South, so many places around the country look to that as a model for like organizing and getting initiatives passed. Such a rich history. And I guess what my continued hopes for the South, and I've said this before, I want more infrastructure. I know that there is more and more advancements and discussions on getting more broadband internet and other things, but I just think that having more infrastructure and more resources put into the fabrics of communities with meaningful involvement of those communities is something I really continue to hope for. Roderick, what about you?
Thank you for asking, Nicole. What have I learned about the South? I'll piggyback off of you a little bit, Nicole. I think being a host on the show has reaffirmed how, folks from the South, and even just going into the South, there's such a rich, vibrant culture, rich, vibrant people. Such one of their strengths is the community and how they engage with each other, and how they fight to continue to allow the South to grow, which would be the answer to the second question is, I want the South to continue to grow. I don't want the South to be stagnant. I want them to have some of the advantages that I felt that we have further up north. And I really feel as though like we could learn from each other, because, as Isaiah said, like each region is unique and different in our own ways. But if we're able to get, a couple golden nuggets and take it back to that region and, incorporate that into the culture, like we can really shift some dynamics and shake some things up. So I definitely want to see the continued growth for the South. And, as a person from the South, I love the South, and, I want nothing but the best for, all of the folks that have come on the podcast, all of the communities that they serve and that they fight for.
We're going into our Southern Charm section. I don't have a real Southern Charm. I don't have an organization to spotlight. But the Southern Charm really is just this podcast and the folks that have been with us along the way. Thank you to our listeners. Thank you to our amazing co-hosts. Thank you to our guests who agreed to participate in this podcast. And thanks so much to all of you for being here for our series finale.
Thank you for listening. Thank you to, again, the folks who have joined us on this journey. It's been quite the ride, and I wish I can get back on it. But this has been a great time. It has actually been one of my favorite functions here at NASDAQ. So shouts out to Nicole, our OG podcaster, and Isaiah too. He didn't stay for season 4, but he was here for 3 whole seasons. So this wouldn't have been possible without, you guys laying the foundation of 7 Seats. So we really appreciate you all.
Ditto. I just echo that thanks. And thank you for welcoming me into the space, even if I haven't been in it for very long. Like, it's been an absolute joy, and I'm grateful that I had a chance to be part of it.
Isaiah, any closing words?
Just to thank all of you and all of the other co-hosts who participated and contributed their talents but aren't here. It really has been a group effort. And so a sincere thanks to them and to each of you.
And another thanks to our incredible, executive producer, Gerald Campos, and the folks at 23DB Productions that have been helping us edit these episodes. For folks that are interested in seeing what's next on the NASDAD podcast journey, follow our social media, stay in the loop, and who knows what's next to come. My name is Nicole Elenoff.
My name's Shanice Bailey.
I'm Isaiah Webster.
And my name is Roderick Shepard.
Thanks for listening.